This morning's reading is from Luke, chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen.
So let's imagine for a moment that you are Peter. Your beloved friend and teacher, Jesus, has beckoned you, along with James and John, to climb one of the highest mountains in Galilee. If you've been to Israel and seen Mount Tabor, it literally sprouts up from the landscape, rising 1,886 feet from the broad, flat Jezreel Valley. The truth is, it doesn't matter if it's a real mountain or a real story. Just climb with me for a bit. As you approach the summit, you stop to rest and admire the view. Then something inexplicable happens. There before your eyes, Jesus is transfigured, which means given an unearthly appearance. His face begins to shine like lightning, and his clothes become dazzling white. "What the heck?" you gasp. Then suddenly Moses and Elijah, the greatest rock stars of the Hebrew prophets, materialize by his side. Because you are Peter, renowned for leaping off boats and walking on water to follow Jesus, you can't contain yourself. "Lord," you cry, "Master, it's good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, 3 condominiums, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Your words barely touch the surface of the welling silence. Then a bright cloud descends and overshadows the scene. A booming voice speaks from the cloud saying, "This is my son, with whom I have chosen. Listen to him." Listen to him. You, James and John, fall to the ground, burying your faces in your sleeves. "Get up and do not be afraid," a familiar voice says. Lifting up your face, Jesus is standing there, all human again. In Matthew's account of the story, as you begin your descent, wondering if anything really happened at all, Jesus orders you to tell no one about the vision. "Not until I am raised from the dead." And what does that mean, "not until I am raised from the dead"? Your body is still shaking, you respond in the only way, the best way you can, with silence. Later that night, you seek a quiet place to be alone. You still yourself, clear your mind of all your usual mental clutter. God, you pray, you said to listen to your beloved Son. And I am ready to listen. I am listening, but what exactly is Jesus trying to say? Krista Tippett, the host of the public radio show On Being, writes in her memoir, "Silence is an endangered quantity in our time. Monasteries and retreat centers are filling up with a new kind of pilgrim, modern people stealing away for solitude, starved for silence. Starved for silence. Isn't that just what it feels like? An ache in your stomach where something nourishing should be. The truth is, something is always blaring in our lives. Silence has become the most elusive of all commodities, more precious even than free time. Parents of young children crave it. Shut-ins try to drown it out. And busy working folks don't even realize it's missing. It's always sobering to realize how uncomfortable silence makes us. Sitting alone in a quiet home can cry out to us of loss. Children's voices that once filled the halls, or the absence of a companion once loved and lost. But silence, my friends, is sacred, and keeping silence, though a lost art, is perhaps the most essential spiritual practice of all. Some have said life is the noise that happens between the quietness of reflection. Silence embraced, writes Tippett, stuns with its presence, its pregnant reality, a reality that does not negate reason and argument, but puts them in their place. I like that quote. I'd like to make a confession this morning. That victim of my own busyness, I have largely abandoned my relationship with silence, carried away by a winter full of visits and sermons and meetings and grandchildren and emails and news dramas. My head is spinning with worldly noise. Maybe yours is too. Certainly we're aware of the commotion that emanated from the White House this week. Anything but silence. Yikes. Perhaps you, like me, have come to realize the ways in which life gets away from it when it's all blather. We roll through our days, but nothing profound happens. Nothing rich happens, nothing spiritual, certainly nothing that remotely resembles a mountaintop epiphany. Since we'll be starting our Lenten theme next Sunday, How We Learn to Be Brave, I included next week's lectionary text in my preparation for today. It's the first time I've ever conflated the transfiguration of Christ with his descent into the wilderness prior to the beginning of his ministry. These two events are not concurrent in Jesus' actual life, but they are liturgically in ours, and that is the point. From the awe of that dazzling transfiguration on the mountaintop, we immediately enter 40 days of temptation and testing, a time for wandering, for silence, a time to think about who Christ is and what he means to us, to listen to the whisperings of God's voice, that may actually be speaking in our lives, and we don't know it. So how does one practice silence in such a deafening world? Well, let me suggest 3 ways. First, turn off one thing at a time. We don't want anyone to have to go cold turkey. Start with the car radio, then the TV, then the little chime in your phone that says you have mail or a text or a message or a meeting in 15 minutes, or that you haven't had enough water, walked enough steps, or that your intermittent fast is over, or there's another tragedy in the world that you must know about right that instant, or a notification asking if you want to set another notification. Turn it all off. The phone, the music, the politicians, the news, the dog, even your family. While all are seductively endearing, God is rarely heard over them. Second, still your body. When I am moving, maybe it's because I'm a certain age, I am thinking about moving. I am being careful with my steps. While some have encountered God on a treadmill, exercise and spiritual reflection can be counterproductive. Buddhists do not jog and meditate. After all, how would you know the difference between an endorphin high and divine revelation? Finally, and I really mean this, do not be afraid. Silence can be terrifying. What truths might steal through the door of your heart if you take the time to be still? Tears, grief, frustration, anger, even our deepest joys can be powerful when finally heard. Why else do we numb ourselves with so much media? It takes the emotional edge off life. Media takes the emotional edge off of life. As Peter can attest, encounters with God can be very emotional. Now, I must tell you, a wonderful thing happened to me this week as I rediscovered the importance of silence. Not only did I experience the comfort of God's presence, but I fell in love once again with my home. It's the truth. On Monday morning, while I gathered my thoughts together, I chose to shut down all my usual distractions, sit perfectly still, and admit entry to whatever God had in store. In what passes for silence, I heard the beloved sounds of my daily life. The fan in the fridge whirring. The furnace in the basement whumping to life. The wind flinging branches against the windows. And then softly this silence was filled with a different kind. The kind that holds memories in it. Some heart-wrenching, some joyous, all reverberating in their own way like that singing bowl, like the symphony of my life. And then out of this lilting silence came a voice. Listen to Jesus. Listen to him. And then that other voice saying, do not be afraid. This space is our church home. Think about what you heard when we sat in silence this morning. The creak of a floorboard, the rustle of paper, the sneeze of a pewmate, the ambient noise of the world out on the square. My friends, I hope over the next 6 weeks of Lent, you will truly make time for silence in your lives. Just imagine how things would feel if you took the time to be still and listen to what Jesus is telling you. In the words of author Kathleen Norris, silence is the best response to mystery. And especially now, there is so much mystery in God's world to be heard. Amen.